I'd like to announce that a quorum is present. The meeting is duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. The time is 6:01 p.m. While we no longer are limiting the number of staff and community members as in-person attendees, we respectfully ask that you maintain social distancing and other health protocols while attending this evening's board work session. In addition, we ask that all those in attendance conduct themselves respectfully at all times during this meeting. Any outbursts or disruptive behaviors may result in your removal from the board meeting. The following board members are in attendance: Tracy Miller, Allison Lasan, Catherine Sells, Dr. Buddy Bonner, Angie Cox, Christy Hassett, and Jenny Prosnick. I have asked board member Allison Lasan to lead us in prayer.
Dear Lord, thank you so much for all your beautiful blessings. We're just so blessed to live in a country where we can come and meet in peace, and we can work for the goodness of the children and all of our staff here in LISD. We just pray for those that are sick or those that are hurting. We pray that you would put a healing arm of protection around them and just be with them as everyone hopefully gets better. And just be with us tonight as we work for these students and staff. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance and Texas Pledge. Our vision statement: all students are enjoy thriving, productive lives in a future they create. Mission statement: students, staff, and community design and implement a learning organization that provides engaging, innovative experiences every day. LISD 4 cornerstones. Student learning. Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Our I statement for tonight is: I ensure learning is based on defined standards where we measure learning outcomes and adjust instruction based on student needs. And you're going to hear board several presentations about that very thing, so we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Persons desiring to address the Board of Trustees must fill out a speaker's card. In accordance with the district board policy, only speaker cards addressing items on tonight's agenda will be acknowledged. No presentation shall exceed 3 minutes. The board cannot deliberate on any subject that is not included on the agenda. We have no speaker cards. Discussion items. Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Our first item for discussion is an update on federal funding, including ESSER funds. So I'll ask Dr. Hart to come forward. We just felt it might, while we've been talking a lot about ESSER funds, we thought it might be a good review for the board as far as just all the different federal funds that we deal with, and make it clear, thanks to the work of Dr. Hart, we're used to dealing with federal funds, and so ESSER is no different. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
Good evening. Let's see, it's the presentation. Hey, there it is. All right, so we are going to talk about first our active federal grants. You can see we have just a little over $75 million in active federal grants. Now these fall into 2 categories. So category 1 is our recurring formula grants. So those are things we get every year. We're very used to dealing with those. And then the other pot that we have this year is our federal disaster money, and all of that is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to go through each of those line items. So if we start with the first one on there, the Every Student Succeeds Act, there's a lot of pieces under ESSA that I think we're all familiar with. So we're going to go through each of those individually. So the first one is Title I Part A. Title I Part A gives us a little over $4.5 million this year, and we received our NOGA on August 23rd, which we like a lot. That gets us set up to start with the new fiscal year right on September 1st. This grant is for schools where 40% or more of the students qualify for free or reduced lunch. So we have 27 schools that meet that criteria. So we have 27 what are called school-wide programs. This is kind of an interesting grant because funds are available for 15 months. So if we needed to, we could start using that funding as far back as July 1st, but then it's going to be active all the way until September 30th of next fall. 90% of the funds are directly allocated to the campuses, so that's on a per-student basis. So what we do is we look at, okay, so here's your campus. You have 500 students, 300 qualify for free or reduced lunch, so we're going to give you a per-student allotment based on those 300 students. So it's directly based on the students who qualify for free and reduced. And district-wide, 70% of our costs go to FTE payroll, so what you're seeing really there is that our campus principals are finding that it's best used with people. So as teachers, there's really no better use of funding there. And then you can see our remaining amount. So that's the remaining beyond the 90% is going to a secondary math facilitator. That's something new that we added last year. So that is someone who is just dedicated to secondary math at the Title I campuses. And then we also have a federal program secretary, and then we have some other little set-asides, indirect cost pieces like that. Another just note I have about the Title I grant is that that 10%, it's actually a little less than 10%, will drop down to even more than, we'll push back most of that to the campuses. So there's a few things that we kind of hold back and we watch and see what happens. And then when nothing happens, like if those, those set-asides aren't used, we push it all out, again, continuing to push it out on a per-student basis to those campuses, those 27 schools. Title I Part C. So this one's a little bit interesting. This is for migrant students. So migrant students are students who are crossing state borders multiple times during a year. And these students are identified. There's actually a form that students fill out at the beginning of the year or anytime they enroll in the district, and it asks about their parents' occupation. So there are only certain occupations that qualify for this. You can see our allotment is lower. This is $898. We actually do not have any migrant students at this time in the district. We didn't have any last year. We had some the year before. I believe we had 3, and the year before that we had 5. This funding is on the same timeline. All of the ESSA grants are on the same timeline. This one's a little bit different because what we do is we actually have Region 11 hold this money for us, and then they use it to provide some services. So one of the interesting things about migrant students is that you actually have to go to the child's home to verify, to do some steps there, and so Region 11 takes those steps for us. The other thing Region 11 does for us is they upload information whenever we have students enrolled in the district into the NGS system. NGS is the new generation system, and that's actually a nationwide system. So that, because the problem when they cross state lines is we can't access some records. When students come to us from San Antonio, from Houston, we can access their records. But when they come from New Mexico, Louisiana, we don't have that ability. So that's what the new generation system does, and that's what Region 11 does for us, and that's why they hold that funding, is to take care of those services. We take care of the student identification, and we take care of providing services for those students. Title II Part A is for supporting effective instruction. This is really about recruiting and retaining effective teachers. We get just under $1 million for this grant, and this one's really exciting because it's district-wide. And over 50% of our funds go to an internal grant application. I have to say, I think this is one of the most exciting things that we do. Dr. Shauna Miller, once a year, she sends out an email that everyone very excitedly waits for, where she says, share with me what you would like to do with your campus, with your department, for professional learning. And you really just get to think about, what can I do to serve my teachers best? What could really help us grow? What might be special, exciting? What speaker could come in? What book should we read together? Is there a new conference that we should try out? Is there something we should bring back? And you can apply, and Dr. Miller will grant you those funds. So that's a really cool thing we do. We also have some district-wide initiatives that we use this funding with. There's mentors. There's a coach mentor program, teacher mentors. Also restorative practices, the leadership initiative with our campus leaders. So there's a number of different things that we do district-wide, and then we also have 1 FTE in the professional learning department. So Title III is for English language learners. We also have just under $1 million for Title III. So 45% of our funds go to supplies and materials for students, or professional learning initiatives, or family and community events, or extra duty overtime payroll. So what that looks like is people who are doing tutoring specific to English language instruction, or curriculum writing, We also have, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of books that come under this one. This is a heavy literacy one. And then you can see we set aside about 15% for those summer programs, SOAR and NISA. And then we have 4 FTE staff that we pay for with this. So we have the multilingual coordinators for elementary. Then we have an ESL specialist, and we have the Title III secretary. Title IV is just a little over $350,000, and this is an interesting grant. It's about 4 years old. So there used to be a whole lot of different federal large initiatives, and what they were, little bitty. So like nationally, there would be, $1 million for this and $10 million for that. And nationally, that's not very much. And so what they did was they brought those together under one umbrella, and they created the Title IV block grant. And so this has really 2 main components. So half of it is for safe and healthy students, and the other part of it is for well-rounded students. So we use our safe and healthy students funding for the, Rhythm. There it is. There's the word I was looking for. The Rhythm program, which we have available at all of our campuses, as well as the Second Step. We have some materials purchased, some Second Step materials that are district-wide purchased out of that grant, and also the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program, which is an after-school program run at 4 of our campuses. So that is covering the safe and healthy student side. On the well-rounded student side, we have the STEM School initiative. So there are several specific items that we purchase out of this grant for the STEM schools. One of the things that we just bought recently was the curriculum for the new STEM middle schools, since we just opened those this year. So we're really excited about that with Title IV. The Special Ed Consolidated Grant. This one is another one of our recurring grants, and we like to spend almost all of this money on staffing. So this is Kathy Talbert. She is the expert on all things under the IDEA-B grant, which comes in as the SPED consolidated application. You can see we spend more than 95% of this grant on payroll. The remaining amount of these funds go to specialized contracted services and supplies and materials for students that are specific to IEPs. The Perkins 5 grant, otherwise known as Carl Perkins, it just changed names last year. We get just a little over $350,000 for this grant this year, and these expenditures go to support our CTE programs, courses offered at the secondary campuses. So we're going to see a wide array of expenditures with this. So some of the things that we did just recently, there was a curriculum program that was purchased for creating websites. Obviously, I don't create websites a lot because I'm struggling to find the word for that. So there's a class that we have where students can work on that. Then another thing that we bought recently, at the middle schools, they have the family and consumer science courses, and they have the babies that cry, and teachers can actually program them to be like a higher needs baby that cries a little bit more, and well, those have to be plugged in. And I'm sure you can imagine what it looks like in a teacher's classroom when you have 30 babies all around the room plugged in. Like, that takes up a lot of counter space, desk space. Teachers don't have room for that. So we bought charging stations for them out of the Title IV grant last year at all of the campuses that have those. So that's just an example of what the expenditures out of that grant look like. Then we have T-Class. T-Class is new this year. It's the Texas COVID Learning Acceleration Supports. So this is actually a grant program that's another umbrella grant, and it's including a large number of programs that they've had before, but at this time they're going to use some COVID money. They're actually using the state's allotment of ESSER 3 money, and they're going to fund some programs that they've had in the past, and they set them up as a formula grant, which is a little bit different in the past because they've been a competitive grant. So there were 2 items on the T-Class grant that really spoke to us this year. So we're in a slightly different situation with this because we've put in our application. We've not yet received the notice of grant award, but we are expecting it on September 10th this year. So we have 2 pieces under that. One of them is the Grow Your Own program. So Grow Your Own is an opportunity for us to help out instructional aides who are wanting to become teachers and working towards getting their teaching certificate and their bachelor's degree. So we're able to provide a stipend for them with a memorandum of understanding to help them cross that line so that they can become teachers in our district. Another part of it is the residency program support. So this one's interesting too. They're really looking at several universities. Student teaching is usually 1 semester, right? You come every day, all day. So they're looking at what if we change student teaching to be a year-long and 3 days a week. That way you can take the information in a little bit more deeply, spend a little bit more time with that teacher, and also have some time so that you could keep a job on the side in case you're needing to pay rent. And we could also pay a stipend to those for 1 year to be able to do that. So that's the residency program support. So those are the two pieces of the T-Class grant that we have signed on for. Then we have the CARES Act. So this is not new. We've talked about this before. The CARES Act, we got just under $4 million, and that came in the initial omnibus disaster relief bill, which was in March of 2020. So the most interesting thing to remember about this bill is that 100% of our funding was supplanted, right? So that means that our ADA came in less this amount. So we have already spent almost all of that. We actually also had to provide private nonprofit services with this grant, which is something that we have to do with our ESSA grants as well. And so we have one little private school with about $200 left, and they're just trying to pick the last things they want to spend. But other than that, we've spent every penny of this because we had to bring it in immediately and get it into our general fund. The ESSER 2 grant, we've also been talking about this one. This one is very interesting because it's partly supplanted and partly supplemental. And what's really important to remember about this one is that we don't know how much is supplemental and how much is supplanted yet. We're still waiting on final numbers to come in from TEA. We have seen a number that says possibly, or a calculation that tells us it could possibly be around $4.5 million, but we don't have very high confidence in that, so it certainly could go higher. So at this time, we're not willing to, put a lot of eggs in that basket, but we do have a list of potential expenditures once we do have that number finalized, including things like credit recovery, subs for the special education classroom, right? So a group of subs who are ready to go into that special education classroom any day, specially trained for that. Contracted services under special education, and also, of course, our air purifiers that we just bought for classrooms. That's something that we could come back and reimburse with this grant. So those are some things we're looking at when we have that final number.
Courtney, let me
Yes,
jump
sir.
in for a minute. Go back to board on ESSER 2, and she mentioned the $4.5 million of the ADA hold harmless, which was sort of an initial amount, but she and I visited last week. We'll probably set aside more of a cushion on the ADA out of ESSER 2 than that $4.5 million. We can, after we land on that, we can certainly find other things to earmark it for, but I don't want to be short on the ADA hold harmless. And so, according to what attendance trends continue, we are absolutely paying attention to that. So.
The ESSER 3 grant, this is the one that we've probably talked about the most. So this is the $37.5 million that we received on June 28th. We received the NOGA for that. So 100% of these funds are supplemental. And all of our expenditures here are listed on the use of funds plan, which you can find online on the LISD website. And for those who are excited about reading it immediately, I'll tell you that if you go to the LISD website, you go to About Us, and then at the bottom right it says All Departments. If you click on All Departments, then you go to Federal Programs. There's a button right on the bottom left that says ESSER 3. So you can find the use of funds plan there. And at this time, everything on the use of funds plan is still where we're at. We are talking about making some small changes to that. Of course, as needs change, as we're talking about staffing, about payroll, there could be a change, and just the main thing to know is that if anything does change, the online use of funds plan will be updated. So as soon as we have anything finalized that will be a change, you'll be able to see it online. And at the time, though, we've not finalized any of those things. So here's a list of some of the potential things that we've talked about doing with ESSER 3, and we have started making plans on these. So this is the same list you've seen before, but it includes maintaining our staffing models and our classroom ratios with about $8.5 million. So some instructional staffing, so ESL liaisons, some additional SPED teachers, a little less than $4 million for additional summer learning, little over $1.5 million for tutoring programs. And then we have some, you'll see at the bottom, we have some set aside for reimbursed costs, because we've talked about what are some of the things that we had to do last year that we had to identify some funding for very quickly. This is a fund, this is a grant that we can go back and reimburse those costs from last year on. So you can see some of those costs right there. That, of course, does not include all of our costs. That's just what we've settled on for this time being, to what we would go back and reimburse.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but if you remember from last week, when we were discussing budget, we said that we would reimburse ourselves about $17.5 million out of the nearly $50 million of ESSER. So did that intentionally. One, as Courtney just said, that nowhere comes close to reimbursing us 100% for all the monies that we spent in the last year plus. But it still leaves a big chunk of the ESSER funds for moving forward, which is what we wanted to do for the next 2 years. So anyway, but that 17.5, of course, will benefit the bottom line for this current budget.
So we do have a number of grants that are closing soon or just recently closed. So you can see that top section is our recurring formula grants. So once again, those are the grants that we receive every year that we're very comfortable dealing with. So we just closed a little over $7.5 million for 2021 ESSA and a little over $7 million for the 1920 ESSA. So I'll tell you what was a little bit different about last year. So normally the federal government on September 30th, they close the grant, and we have to get past a certain spending threshold, right? So what we normally do in Lewisville ISD is spend more than 90% of the grant. And then they take the leftover and they give it to us back in carryover. So we get it around November or December of every year, which is always nice. We call it the spring bump because that's when the schools get it. Feels good. It's a nice little extra Christmas gift for everyone. What they did last year was they just never closed the grant. So we had 2 grants open the entire year. So we're just now about to close 1920 ESSA, and we're going to close 2021 ESSA as well. We're also closing the Perkins 5 grant from last year and the SPED Consolidated, same thing as ESSA, the 2021 grant and the 1920 grant. So you can see we've got about $19 million in SPED Consolidated there. So those are our recurring formula grants that we're about to close. Then we have some one-time formula grants related to the disaster or disaster reimbursement grants. So you can see we had the Instructional Continuity Grant, we had a FEMA award, we had the CRF LEA, that $300,000, that actually came from the Texas Department of Emergency Management. We received $1.7 million out of the CRF Prior Purchase Reimbursement Program, the PPRP. That came directly from reimbursing us for devices that we purchased. So you can see that's what we received from our disaster formula grants recently.
Okay, Dr. Hart, all that without looking at a single note. We're going to start with Ms. Prosnick, and the reason is because when we get to the star item, Ms. Hassett will be number 1 on the list, so we're prepared for that. But Ms. Hassett, go ahead. Or I'm sorry, Ms. Prosnick, go ahead.
Do you want all questions or just one?
Just lay them out there.
Okay. The first question I have is, how many students do these funds affect?
Certainly. So that's different with each grant program.
Right.
So the Title I grant program, all of those students at our school-wide programs, which is 27 campuses, that is about 20,000 students. So Title II actually is 100% of our students because that's district-wide. Right. Title III is just over 8,000, but we expect it, though that number is rising every day, so we expect it to be between 9,000 and 10,000 of our students. Title IV affects district-wide. That affects 100% of students with our purchases, rhythm, et cetera. IDEA-B affects every student who is receiving special ed services, and the Perkins 5 grant is available to any student who's at the secondary level.
I just wanted to intimate that these funds are being spent, they're not just being spent on a small fraction of our students, they're being spent on all of them. And then I do have a question, and it may not be a question for you, but is the E-rate program not considered a federal fund program? Because it's not listed, but I know we participate in it.
I believe that's a technology program. I'm going to defer to...
It is it wasn't listed in here, but I know it's a grant program, so I just didn't know how that worked here.
I think Mr. Colbeck might respond to that.
Yeah, the E-rate program, it is a federal program. It's administered at the highest level by the FCC. And the USAC, which is Universal Service Administration, I can't remember what the C is, they oversee the program, so you file the applications for funding requests directly to them.
And luckily, Dr. Hart doesn't have to deal with the E-rate. One of the few.
Thank you, Brian. Ms. Sells.
This one? Okay, person. Okay, let's see. Well, part of mine was the students, because I think that most people in the district would be surprised that Title I fund actually hit that many campuses. I think for some people in our community, they feel like that we have maybe 2 or 3 campuses that qualify for Title I. And so I think that is a thank you for including that. Thank you for explaining that. And also that 90% of those funds actually stay there allocated to those campuses. And I appreciate that. So that was just a comment from mine. The migrant education program, that fascinates me that we go through Region 11 on that. Can you tell me how, because obviously the students are coming into us and we're usually the first contact, because I would imagine that those students don't know where Region 11 is. So how does that process work, and how do we verify the information that we're receiving from our students is actually, can you just go through that process? I know that there's a Skyward form probably for that. I know there is. But I want you to help us understand that explanation. I want to make sure that no child falls through the gaps on this one. So, and even though it's a very, very small, and now 0 of our population, it just leads me to wonder. So
That's a great question, and it's something we've talked about as well. Just because those numbers are so low, so Ms. Clark and Ms. Bray and I have had multiple conversations just about double checking, okay, where does this go? Who all sees this form? How all does this go out? So you're right, it's a form that's in Skyward. So the packet that goes out at the beginning of the year, there's a place in there where students say, do your parents work in one of these professions? And then if students mark yes, then that gets marked in Skyward as this child is a migrant student. And so what I do is I have a report that I pull regularly, and every time I pull that report, I look and I make sure that no one is a yes. The second someone is a yes, I contact Region 11 and I give them that child's contact information, and then Region 11 contacts the student and they go out and do the verification pieces. So they're the ones who are taking that for us, but we are the ones who do the baseline identification, making sure that we've got everyone. So at that point, Region 11 goes out, and I'll tell you, every time they've ever gone out, which is not for a large number of students, but every time they've gone out, they've called and said, yes, this child receives services. And then what they do, there's a number of things, which is taking a lot of pieces of data and making sure that they're available in case that child moves and crosses state lines. That way the information can be taken out of the system and seen by their next school. But then the other thing is just making sure that we've checked on everything. Does this child know what the tutoring services are? Does this child know that we have things available through Communities in Schools North Texas? Have we ensured that there's nothing else that needs to be met for this student, if that makes sense? So it's a lot of check marks, making sure of those things. I can tell you that the schools where we have had those students have a lot of services available, so I've not been scrambling to say, oh my gosh, how are we going to serve this? I just kind of check, okay, Lakshmi, you have 19 tutoring programs. This child is in 4 of them, right? Yes, the child is in 4 of them. So it's been for us a lot of just, really making sure that we're meeting all of that student's needs and then submitting that into the NGS system. Does that help?
yes,
Okay.
very much so. And like I said, I know we have 0 students, but that just the context of how that all operates is such a different diagram than what usually we follow.
It is.
That it just surprised me. Then on the Title I Part A, 50%, less than 50% of LISD internal grant applications, all campuses eligible. How are those grants guaranteed that they are distributed fairly and equitably then across those campuses that are eligible?
Certainly. So the Title II Part A programs, that's Dr. Shauna Miller, and she sits down with, if I'm not mistaken, the learning and teaching team, and they have conversations about what are all of the campus's needs, what are all of the department's needs, and then they look through them and have that conversation amongst themselves.
So it's something that's reviewed annually?
Oh, yes, annually, and then they usually come back to it multiple times and look at it again. I know that we have multiple conversations throughout the year of re-looking at funding, because with grants this large, it feels really good at the beginning of the year to get those budget pieces in place. We're going to spend $200,000 on that, and then 4 months later, you're like, well, that cost $150,000, which is nice, but now we have $50,000 left. So what do we do? So that's the kind of thing where they come back to the table a lot and look at it over and over again. So there is an initial conversation and there is an initial distribution of funds. Once that happens, funds get transferred into accounts. It really is kind of an exciting holiday moment when the funds get transferred. But then it's not over. We do talk about it again and again. We were having conversations as late as June and July, and I want to say possibly even August. I'm looking at Ms. Rupert, who's nodding at me. We had conversations as late as even August about, hey, I just thought of this book. I wish I thought of it last September, but I just thought of it just now in August. Can you buy me 50 copies of this book? And we say, yes, we can buy 50 copies of that book. So Dr. Miller does a lot of continual looking at that and putting funds in the right places throughout the year, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that does make sense. And I just wanted to know how that overarching and that explains it. So thank you. And then Title III Part A, the FTE staff, are those administrative based, and I'm talking physically their job responsibilities, are those just in-house, and so their communications with the campuses are really email, or do they visit the campuses? And if they do so, how do they structure their coverage?
It's a great question. So I can say they have desks here. They have desks that have their names on them. They're a little hard to find sometimes. They do spend most of their time out at campuses. So they do a number of different things. So we have those 2 elementary multilingual coordinators, and they spend a lot of time doing model lessons, working with administrators, looking at data, but also meeting with I mixed these up, Lassies? Yeah, with the language acquisition specialists at the elementary level, and helping them to identify, hey, what's the best way that you can strengthen frontline instruction for our language learners at the campuses. Same with our secondary coordinator. She does a lot, the ESL specialist, she does a lot of meeting with I mixed these up. What are they at the secondary level? Liaisons, the ESL liaisons, and she works with them on looking at data and what are the different ways that we're serving students and what does that look like in the classroom. Does that help?
Very much so. Okay, and I think that's all I have for right now. I think I've written some other stuff down, but I don't have my questions formulated.
Ms. Hassan.
Thank you, Dr. Hurd. This is a lot, and I'm glad that we have you to take care of it all, and I'm sure Dr. Rogers is too, because that is a lot. So I guess the thing I was going to focus on is, of course, the IDEA grants. So my understanding is that, based on law, it's still not really, IDEA is not fully funded the way it's supposed to be. To the tune, isn't it around, like it was supposed to be 40% and they don't, or something like that?
Yeah, I think 40% would be very generous. I don't even
Okay.
think it's that close.
Okay, that's what I was, anyway, but it's not funded, so I just, sort of a little public information item there, is that it's not even funded the way it's written in the law. Anyway, so how, and you may not know this, I don't know, maybe you do, of how much, so, we get, slightly less than $9 million there, but how much do you think we spend, on special ed type stuff?
I think we spend about 2.5 times that amount,
Wow,
at least.
yeah.
So we probably spend $12 to $15 million more for special ed programs than we get from the federal government.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really, I just was kind of making that comment in there, but that.
I was feeling good till you asked that question.
So yes, this is all great stuff, but I just kind of wanted to point that out. But thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. I had a question, Title III, Part A, the English language acquisition. Is that formula-driven?
Can you say that one more time?
Is it formula-driven? I mean, it's less than $1 million, so it's
Yes, ma'am, it's formula-driven.
based on the number of students?
I believe that is based on based on things we submit through PEAMS. Yes,
That's
ma'am.
just- With our population of English language learners, it's just shocking. Okay, next question for the T-class, page 6, the residency support program. Do we
Yes.
have a tie to one of the colleges around for a connection?
So TEA had a long list of,
Right. Yeah.
They had a list, maybe 15 colleges on it.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we looked through that list and we just made sure that we marked everyone that we were going to have the ability to possibly work with, because we didn't want to limit ourselves in terms of where we could draw potential future teachers from.
Okay. But we use a lot in the area too, though, because we have several in our area that are on that list, right?
Actually,
TWU and, no?
Actually, if I remember correctly, there were not many in our
Really?
area on the list, which was surprising to us.
Really? That is surprising.
And I would be very curious to know, how did they begin those relationships with them for that specific program? That's a great question.
Okay. Another question about the awards that we are trying to close for the 2 years ago. I'm
Yes.
guessing we probably spent most of those by now?
Yes, ma'am. We spend our awards down to $0.00.
Okay.
Yes. We like buying things.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to say thank you very much. I know you do a lot of work, and when this whole ESSER thing came out, you and I visited, and you were just telling me you figured out how to slice pizza to make it work because they said you could provide food, and I was just mind-boggled of all that. So anyway, thank you very much for all the hard work and what you do to utilize these funds. So my question is about the Title III Part A. You mentioned literacy, so does that include books in the library, or does that include those
No,
type of literacy?
that's a good
or-
question. I believe none of the books we bought have been for the library. I believe they have been going to classroom libraries.
Okay, in the specific classroom?
Yes,
Like maybe
ma'am,
a set or
specific-
something, you kind of mentioned the books.
Yes, ma'am, specific classrooms.
Okay, would that be something could be possible, or no?
Would that be, ask me one more time?
To go books in the library, would that be possible funding for that, or no?
That one might be difficult because that's one of the grants. Title I Part A, we can spend on any child in the school, right? Title III Part A, we have to ensure that it's going to students who are coded as LEP in the system. And so that's where it might get a little tricky, is to have it out on a shelf, and then say, okay, well, this is for,
Right.
you can go to this shelf, no one else look at that shelf. So that might get a little tricky in the library.
Okay, just curious. My other question was about the Texas COVID, the learning acceleration. Do you see that as an ongoing, or do you see that stopping after a few years, or
That
next
is
year?
a big question mark above my head. So I think it has the potential to keep going, especially with as much work as TEA put into building it into a formula grant, into one application. They put a lot of time and effort into that, and I would be surprised if they did that for something that was going to be so short as 2 to 3 years. But at the same time, the funding source they're using on it is the state's ESSER III funding source. So that's a good question. I'll be curious to see what happens with that.
Yeah, me too. My last question is regarding these grants, you'd mentioned, we found some ways to buy books. Have we ever been in a position where we would not meet the funds and we would have to give money back? Or, obviously, I would hope not. We would spend that money, but.
Grants, it is harder than you would think to spend grants. So there are certainly times when we start picking up the phone and going, okay, so didn't you say you had something that you really wanted? There were a bunch of books you wanted, right? So there are certainly times when we pick up the phone, just because with timelines, it can really get tricky. An example is there's a grant called the 1003 School Improvement Grant, which actually falls under the umbrella of Title I. And it's a tremendous amount of money. It's like $120,000 per campus per year. That's fantastic, right? You get the money in October. You have to spend it by, well, they say the end of the year, but really by September 30th of the next year. And there's a payroll cap of 60% on it. How are you supposed to hire, a powerful staff member if you can't start looking until early to mid-October? And then there's a 60% payroll cap. There is also, I believe, a furniture cap, no furniture. So if you go, okay, well, all right, let's do some really cool, classroom things where we're going to have like a mobile classroom and students will have, like the bouncy balls for fidgety students and stuff like that. You can't buy furniture under it. So you start going, like, okay, how many highlighters can we buy? How many binders can we get? It really becomes frustrating sometimes with how many limitations there are in ways to spend funds. So there are times when it gets difficult. We are very lucky to be in a district with a couple of big spenders. So we're usually able to make a few phone calls and say, all right, go ahead and send that list of books over. Go ahead and send the list of books, or some other things like that. So we do get down to the bottom of it, but it is more difficult than you would expect.
Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate that because you're utilizing all the funds that are accessible for us. It's kind of what Ms. Lasan said. When we don't get funds from other areas, it's nice to get all the grant money that we can. So very appreciative of that.
Dr. Bonner.
Dr. Hart, I'm hesitant to beat a dead horse, but I would like to mimic Ms. Lasan and Ms. Cox and thank you for your work here. I know from the past that your office typically has about $7.5 or $8 million that you're responsible for, so this is quite a bit more for the next couple of years, so I'm thankful you're in place to do that. And I talked to Dr. Rapp about this a little bit last week, and I'm going to come around this about from a revenue side maybe. If you could do me a favor, if you haven't, would you look at the Title campus revenue per student versus, and if you have it, I'll be surprised, versus non-Title campus revenue per student? I'd like to just see a comparison of that, if you would, please. Might need to talk to Mr. Youngs, too.
Do you want me to discuss it? Because I can give you about a roundabout of how much additional we're giving per student.
If you can address it now, that'd be awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, certainly. It's a minimum of $250 per student additional that we're giving to our Title I campuses. But some of our campuses have more than that. So here's the way the Title I formula is built for within the district, and I actually really like it a lot. So the higher percentage of students you have that are on free and reduced lunch, the higher the per student amount is that they want you to give. So in other words, if you're a school with 45% free and reduced lunch, and then there's a school across the road with 85% of students on free and reduced lunch, you really need to be giving a higher per student dollar amount to the school with 85% free and reduced lunch. And the reason for that is if you have a classroom and half of your students, right, might have trouble, buying all of the things that they need for school, that's one thing. That's difficult. It's another thing if you're in a class of 22 students and 21 of your students have a hard time getting those things. That's a very different situation. And so what they're really trying to do is just multiply the support that's given to those campuses to really try and lift the weight off of their shoulders, if that makes sense, for improving basic education. So for that reason, the number goes up. It looks different for those campuses with a higher number of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch.
Dr. Bonner, I would remind the board, too, that thanks to the generosity of the board the last 4 or 5 years or longer, we also staff those campuses at a lower class student to teacher ratio than any other school. So that's another way that we try to provide more support to those campuses.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. The only thing I would add, echo the kudos and thank you for that and being able to answer a roundabout answer to or a rounding number to Dr. Bonner. So impressive. Is that even in an era where we've been having free and subsidized free lunches for everybody, it's important that campuses promote and parents sign up for free and subsidized lunches because there are other things that come with that. And we forego that when people say, well, I'm getting the free or subsidized lunch, therefore I don't need to sign up for it. It hurts the campus, therefore it hurts the students, correct? Okay.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah. It's very important.
Anybody else? Okay.
I did remember one other question. With the Grow Your Own and the residency program program support programs, how many people are we going to be able to, or aides or others, are we going to be able to touch using those dollar amounts?
The number of, it's on the second bullet, so the residency program support, that has a cap of 20. And the one above it, the Grow Your Own program, I want to say it was a cap of 8. It was, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it was around there.
Ms.
Thank
Hassett?
Dr. Bonner, I also asked Dr. Rogers the same question about trying to get some information on campus revenue, particularly related to the additional funding. So if we could actually see that, I would love it. But then I had a strange question that came up. It seems like the formulas for federal grants seem to be a bit antiquated in terms of the new and improved student learning that we have. How can we start advocating for changes in the formula grants, in the federal funds, so that we can make them understand that furniture could be very helpful to students? And how can we better advocate to changes in the funding for these federal grants? You don't have, if you could pontificate on that later. And if we could help as a board and advocate for the changes, that would be great.
That's the most exciting question ever. I am going to have to
You're a nerd.
pontificate a little bit, but I'm really excited to have been asked that question.
Just
I will
let
have
us
to-
know how we can help,
We'll have to
because,
simmer on that.
We will get back to you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Hart, thank you very much. Dr. Rapp?
All right, I'm going to ask Ms. Lewis and Ms. Adams and Ms. Casal and Ms. Knight to come on up. We're excited to provide this this presentation to you on middle school study skills, which has actually been called a much more exciting topic, which is learning to learn. And so they've done some great work, as you all saw in board book, continuing what we promised when it came to study skills for all students at middle school. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Lewis.
Okay. I was like, wow, these are fancy. So thank you all for welcoming us tonight. We wanted to come back and really give you an update of the progress we've made with the Learning to Learn program and how we are using and implementing with the teachers and the administrators on the campus. And so what we really did was we put together as a committee a presentation for principals to go back and share with their staff, because it was really important for the staff to have some experiences so they would get buy-in to ensure that rollout through the campus, to your sixth graders at some campuses, and some campuses elected to do it all grade levels. So this is really the presentation used with the staff, and then we added a little bit at the end. But the agenda to share with the staff really talked about, we had to give them the history like we did with you and the background of why we got where we were, just the timelines of implementation, and then as the SEL competencies and curriculum is what we reviewed with them, so they were familiar with that. And then also the review of the lessons and materials that the committee put together last spring.
So if you remember, we had a committee of district administrators, campus administrators, and counselors, teachers, and parents, probably about 40 people that got together during the spring of last year. We developed all of the lesson plans, honed in on the implementation model, and then put it all together. So the rollout this year is Ms. Lewis and I were able to meet with the campus principals in June to kind of give them the pre-glance of what we had and let them put in any pieces that they thought would be helpful to support the campus. We were then able to roll it out to all of our assistant principals at the Thrive in a Thrive presentation, as well as the campus counselors in their back-to-school presentations. We built Canvas classrooms in the Commons that all of the campuses were able to go in and make a copy for their campus and personalize it. And then we created a quick start guide for administrators, and you can see that in your packet with just a one-pager of campus decision points, a checklist, as well as an overview of timelines, because we wanted to make sure that it was functional for the campuses and that everyone understood not only the why, but we made sure that we articulated the how. So this was part of our presentation that they did in the back to school with all of the staff, and they really talked about what are you bringing to the table when it comes to organization and time management. Because if you remember, the three pieces that we honed in on were organization, time management, and note-taking. And so we allowed some time and discussion for the teachers to reflect on how they stayed organized, how they stayed on top of their schedule, as well as how they engaged in their own learning when there was a lot of content, because we wanted them to really be mindful of what they were going to be bringing into their classroom discussions and sharing with their students.
So we talked to the staff really about where we got, we're at this point to where we wanted to implement this at the campus. So we shared that as early as 2011, study skills was being implemented at the campus, more of a time for kids to catch up on their homework. And then as time went on, like in 15, 16, 17, it was being used more and more. And we wanted to have conversations really about the phase out of pulling away from just that study skills time to do homework and transition more to where that next year we required curriculum to be used. And campuses could utilize different forms of study skills curriculum, but that was an expectation that next year that they have some sort of curriculum in that study skills class. The following year, we had more campuses that started to move away from that and implement into advisory and in just different areas at the campus based on their specific needs with SELs and different students.
So then this is the recommendation that we made to y'all the last time we met. So last spring, we were going to pull together a mixed group of campus leaders. We did have to make some adjustments with COVID, but we were able to stay on track with rolling out this fall 6th grade lessons. And some of the campuses, like Ms. Lewis said, elected to do them in grades 6 through 8. And then this spring, we're going to release some parent modules that are aligned with the experiences that our students got this fall. And then next year, we'll continue that implementation of the 6th grade experiences. We did choose the word experience instead of lesson because we really want it to be, I think we said in the first time, it needs to be in the context of content. It can't just be a 20-minute lesson, one and done. And then we'll continue to roll out our 7th graders and more parent modules.
So then we just shared with the staff a survey that we sent out to all campuses regarding what was already taking place at campuses. And so these were things that different campuses shared, that you would find it embedded in content, in advisory lessons. Some campuses were using with their RTI students or in BASE, as well as many campuses, you know, that first week of school actually do the boot camps to where they focus on different structures in the campus as well as different study skills and address those areas as needed, depending on the campus. It varied.
And I know y'all have seen this slide before, but we really wanted the best practices to be embedded in social emotional learning. So Castle recognizes these as the 5 core competencies, and you can see the crosswalk of where a study skill relates to a competency such as social awareness, responsible decision making, because again, anything that we are implementing, we want to make sure we're doing it in collaboration and in unity with all of the other programming that we're doing. And so we wanted to make sure that our vocabulary aligned and that we were intentional about making sure that this was something that our students would be able to take forward even as they left middle school.
So as a committee, we worked to develop 7 lessons. We had an introductory lesson that Mrs. Adams and I actually worked on. And our focus of that introductory lesson was really allow time for the teachers to get to know their students and get to have an opportunity for the students to self-reflect so the students could then learn about their kids and see what were specific weaknesses in their kids so they could focus on those throughout the year. Also, we had time management that we asked the campuses to implement those first 2 weeks, then note-taking sometime in September, and then in October, the second 9 weeks, our last area was the organization. So we really tried to get all of these, because there are other lessons that have to be covered in advisory, so we couldn't implement it all at once. And so we were spreading it out and giving time for campuses to follow up with in the actual classrooms and implement and work through. And so now we actually brought, this is the most exciting part, Mrs. Casal and Mrs. Knight, who are going to share specific examples of how it's worked at their campus and experiences that they've had with their staff.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Casal, and I'm the principal at Lamar Middle School. And we've done a few of these lessons already. The very first one that we did, the introductory lesson with the self-reflection, I actually had the pleasure of teaching it to a group of students on campus. We had a teacher who unfortunately was very ill that day and had to be out, so, the lesson must go on. So I got to teach it, and wow, I was so impressed. The kids were their participation, they were discussing, we were having such fun and just talking about, oh my goodness, tell me all about what's hard for you. And they were having honest discussions with me. Like, some kids were like, oh my gosh, I really struggle with I don't know how to organize my time. If I've got, a test coming up and I have, soccer practice, etc. We're so busy at home. Another student saying, my Google Drive is a hot mess. And so we talked about that. I shared things that I struggled with in school and what my, strengths and weaknesses were as well. And I told the kids, I gave them a little foreshadowing of what was to come over the next several weeks. And they were really excited about it. They were like, thank you. We really want to learn about this. And just for reference, the group that I was teaching was a group of 8th graders. And they were really excited about being introduced to this before going off to high school. So yes, I decided to implement it campus-wide across all 3 grade levels at Lamar.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this too. I was on the time management committee. I was the leader of that group, and so I just want to start with telling you a little bit about that. So first of all, the video that introduces the time management modules came from the teen leader. It's not called teen leadership anymore. Leadworthy. Thank you. Leadworthy class on my campus. I had to. We were missing that one little last piece for this lesson module, and I was kind of in a panic because I had to come up with it and it was due. And I went to the Leadworthy teacher and I said, "Hey, can you just do this video for can you just put this together for?" And they came up with this amazing video that included alumni from our district. It included I think somebody from the state championship soccer team, several high school students, middle school students, and it is a terrific way. And they talk about how they have learned to use time management skills. It's just a great way to introduce the time management module. It's quick, but it does the trick. I think it's extremely effective. I hope you get a chance to see it. So that's how it introduces the time management module. And then I also want to tell you that I got so excited about this as being a part of this committee and talking to some of the other people on the committees. Another administrator recommended this parenting book called That Crumpled Paper Was Due Last Week. And so I read it at the beginning of the summer. It's Anna Homayun, if you want to check it out. I used Title II funds, speaking of title money, and we're using it as a campus book study for all the teachers on my campus. So not only are we doing this with our students, but this book that we're reading for all of our teachers, in fact, we're doing chapter 1 and 2 in the morning for our first faculty meeting, our book study, and it dovetails. So what the students are doing, the teachers are doing as well to help reinforce the learning with our students. So I just wanted to say that also. So the other thing I wanted to say, I have so much to say, but I'll be quick. I went to my campus leaders in the summer to tell them about all this, and they were so excited about it. I said, you have a choice. You can do this with just 6th graders, or we can do this with all 3 grades. And like Christy said, they wanted to for sure do the time management modules with all 3 grades because they wanted all of our students to have planners. So for the first time in probably 6 years, I bought planners with campus funds for all of our students because they felt like that was critical, and I hadn't done that in a long time, and that has been a game changer. to have planners that go with the lessons in the time management modules for all of our students. So we've done that. What they did decide to do, though, is note-taking and organizational modules just for the sixth graders, because they felt like they wanted to start with that for the sixth graders, and then, of course, next year we'll roll that out with seventh and eighth graders, and I think that was the right decision. Then the other thing I wanted to let you know is a little bit about the self-reflection survey that the students took, because I thought you would find some of that feedback interesting, as I did, and that's the last thing I'll say. These are self-perceptions, right? Student self-perceptions. They rank themselves fairly high on organizational management, their time management, and remembering to bring things to school. They didn't rank themselves very highly on their ability to take notes and their organizational skills, and then they ranked themselves highly again on their ability to study for tests. Now, I don't know if we would all agree with that or not, but I wanted you to know that at least at McCamey, that's how the students ranked themselves. So I thought I would share that with you. The last thing I'll tell you is my students at my campus are actually enrolled in this Canvas course, and the parents are able to, I can see that the parents are enrolled as observers. So my parents are able to actually see what their children are doing in this course. I thought you would appreciate that. Thank you so much for allowing us to do this. What do I get out?
All right, so we'll take any questions at this time, but they've done a great job of bringing the vision forward. I love that they called it Learning to Learn. That's so much better than study skills, so thank goodness that y'all all came up with that, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Sells.
So what have been the cost for doing this? Is it really just our intellectual cost of knowledge that you all have brought? I think that's fantastic for the district to be able to bring this kind of program to the campuses for that. I appreciate that you're not just going out and trying to buy software and programs in here, that you really have taken what you know from being on the campuses and developing that. So thank you for that.
We purchased planners, but
And the planners,
Yeah.
yes, of course, yeah. But other than that, I'm talking that intellectual just piece of it, and I think that's amazing. And then I got M, so let me think what the M stood for. The cost measurements. So how are we going to measure the success of this? And somebody could address.
Well, one of the things that I'm planning to do at Lamar is we've got, that student self-reflection that the kiddos did, and I've already shared the results, that data, with my entire staff in my staff update, and reminded them what a great opportunity this is for you guys to get to know your students even more as you see. Kelly, I noticed that you really struggled on this past test. And I looked here, and you said that you have been struggling with, in your self-reflection, you mentioned you struggle with, X, Y, Z. So let's sit down and let's talk about how we can work through that and to prepare better for next time. There's also another reflection coming up on another one as well. So I've reminded the staff that, you did this activity with your advisory class, but you have access to the results for our entire student body. So you can go in and see any one of your kids at any one time, and how they're performing, and using that as a conversation with those kids in a teaching moment.
My only negative is I wish this had been here for my kids in middle school, because I had to go out and pay SMU to teach my kids organizational skills, and it was not cheap, and it was something we had to budget for as a family throughout the year to be able to afford. But knowing that the kids in LISD are going to, what I see, more robust than what my kids received there at a cost is phenomenal. So thank you all. So if the negative is really a good positive. So thank you all.
Son?
So I'm very excited about this, personally, because my little sixth grader has already come home talking about it a little bit. He was talking about the notes, and he's taking tech apps, and he said that his tech app teacher, he said his Google Drive was a hot mess, and that he had cleaned it all up, and that they had done for each class, he had done, I think it was a notes, and one of them, anyway, he had 2 folders for each class. So there was a lot of this, and I was like, hey, I know why he's doing that, so I'm excited to see that roll out, and I think this is going to be great.
Could I speak to that? That was actually one of the self-reflection questions that they all said they were struggling with, and there's a specific module, I can't remember if it's in note-taking or organization, because we haven't gotten it to it yet. That's the last module, but there's a specific unit for, that will help with that.
Yes.
It's coming.
So he's excited. They've done that already, so I think it's going to be great. So thanks for all the work on that.
Thank you.
Learning to learn, love it. That's awesome. Really excited about all the work you've done. Really, really appreciate it. Is this going to be an advisory course for all, or a course? Or it's in advisory?
Say that again, I'm
Is it
sorry.
in advisory, or is it an actual elective course?
So it's implemented in advisory, but the second follow-up lesson in some of them, actually, they then transition and implement it into the classroom, so the kids are actually experiencing it within their lessons. And we hope the teachers will continue to implement and utilize, because these are the 3 areas that we're honing in on this year for the kids. So it's not a separate class, so it's specific to advisory.
But I saw a math teacher today take what had happened in advisory and implement it in math class today, which was really exciting.
That is really exciting, because my boys who were McCamey-Knights, if they would have filled out that form, they might have been fibbing, but they didn't fill out that form. I think this is invaluable to students. And I'm wondering also, could we have a refresher in 10th grade in advisory? Can we have, because sometimes in middle school you'll glom onto one of these things and then you'll forget about the other organizational things that will help you learn to learn. So can we just have a course in sometime in high school to prepare you to move through high school, so that you can remember, oh, that's right, we learned that and I never used it, but I really want to use it now. So I'm just wondering if we can, of course I'm greedy and asking for more, but I don't mind. Thank you so
Well, and I
much.
can just say, speaking to one of the beauties of rooting it in our SEL competencies is that as we're rolling out all of our programming and SEL in high school, we can certainly, these are critical components that would fall under that umbrella. So certainly that is noted.
Thank you.
Well, I can tell you, as my fellow board members have said, this is so valuable for kids. I can, as the other board members have said, I can speak firsthand. That was the first thing, my kids, when they went to college, we have no clue how to take notes. We don't know what to remember from the professor. So I can't tell you how valuable this is for the kids. So thank you. My questions are, just a few, is this something that's just done in the first semester of school, or is this something, you talked about implementing in the classroom, but I could see this as, okay, bam, we did this now, and then now we work on our other things that we have to talk about in advisory, or is this something we spread throughout the year to continue that note-taking process, continue the reflection, et cetera?
It currently is set up for the first half of the year, but I'm planning to bring it back and keep talking about it periodically throughout the course of the school year, so with our students.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, when I was in a math class today and I saw that math teacher reinforcing it, that was really encouraging to me. So I think we can do that as leaders, but I'm seeing it happen with the teachers in the classroom. So that was exciting.
Yeah, that's very good.
We narrowed it down to 3 specifically because our hope was that we would implement early in the year so the kids were, made aware of the 3 areas of focus for the year, and the teachers to continue. So that's a conversation I will also continue with my group of principals to just make sure they're reinforcing, because ultimately we really want it implemented through the content so they're actually utilizing. And when you look at note-taking, there's umpteen different ways you can note-take. So it will get broader as they progress into 7th and 8th grade. It's a little bit more narrowed down. But when we were talking about it, we talked about how to expand it in 7th grade and 8th grade. So, we can't introduce everything in that note-taking piece, because the kids, they wouldn't get good at one thing because they would. And so that's really what we want to do. And so we will continue to work through that throughout the year.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because, as kids, become 7th graders and 8th graders, then they get into sports, they get into the other activities, and just to pull the time management piece out, that is very hard and this real struggle for kids, mentally and everything of, okay, I'm doing all these things, I'm about 5 clubs at my campus, and I'm doing 2 sports. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but they manage to do it, but just that time management piece is just so important. So I'm glad to see that you're continuing it throughout the year. And then my other question was, is this a principal's choice? Because you kind of alluded to that a little bit, where you could do 6th through 8th, or because I would really love to see that, kind of Ms. Hassett's in 10th grade, or is this, is that what it is? It's 6th through 8th. It sounds like it's a choice.
It is a choice, but I believe 75 to maybe even 100% actually chose to do it across all grade levels. I can't speak 100%, but most campuses were going. And the reason is because we haven't had a focus for 7th and 8th grade, so we felt like in year 1, if they wanted to implement across all 3 grade levels, we would do that. Next year, of course, 7th will get a new curriculum, and so 7th and 8th may use that. And then next year, 6th graders will do what we currently do now and this year. And so that, it just as the progression and creation goes, we will continue to move up.
My last and final question, I promise, is, I think it's called endorsements. I can't even remember now. I would like to see that implemented in these conversations. And I can just tell you, I spoke with a senior parent last week. He wanted to switch a class because he was in, because now he may not graduate because it wasn't part of his endorsement. And he goes, I don't even know what my endorsement was. What did I even pick? I mean, how are you supposed to pick in 8th grade what you want your career path to be starting college? So I think planting these seeds early in 6th grade, at least they'll have an inkling of, I really do like math a lot. I really grasp this. Okay, these might be some choices for you. I just like to start maybe planting those seeds a little early so they really can start thinking about it. Instead of 8th grade, you're now to pick your schedule and pick your endorsement for your 9th grade year.
And I can speak to that a little bit. We do have a future pathways model that we use grades 6 through 12. We actually rolled it out after a committee in 1920. And so we have started integrating those conversations related to what classes you like, related to kind of, it uses our Choices 360 software, but we have added on parent modules, a parent activation letter. So in the next 2 weeks, those future pathways lessons are starting in all of our middle schools, and those will also be through advisory. Because we want, I think, one of our pieces that came out of our Future Pathways Committee is we want students to make informed decisions instead of the fire hose that happens during registration. So we want to give them tidbits along the way, the did you knows along the way, so that when it comes to pick an endorsement or pick your schedule, they've had all the information over a span of time except in a packet during registration. So we know that is a work in progress with the volume of information, but we continue to do that as well under our advisory lesson umbrella.
Great. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Rogers, I'm reminded of advisory lessons, metacognition, all that sounds familiar, doesn't it? From our time together a long time ago, right? A long time ago, that's right. So, those middle school concepts are solid and good. And so thank you, committee, for making sure that parent input and participation was part of the development, right? And Kelly Knight, I was excited to hear you talk about really this content being integrated into other classes, maybe through just coincidence and the teacher's recognition that, hey, this over here would work here. But so that's a testament to your leadership, right? And that's a culture. That's a culture you've built there, and I appreciate that, and look forward to hearing 14 other principals say the same thing about this. So thank you very much.
I too, like Dr. Bonner, am looking forward to the integration across all of our middle schools so that to his point, it just becomes part of the culture. And you'd spoken about one of my questions, which is what does this look like in a math class, for example? So I appreciate that. For the note-taking, will it be Cornell Notes that is taught?
It's actually not my committee, but we're doing note-taking this week. So that is it is one of the options that was talked about. It's not the only option, but that Cornell Notes was discussed in the modules this week.
So, and I know this is future, but so will we choose one kind of note-taking and do that across the district, or is it going to be, I'm going to be very blunt, a hodgepodge where everybody gets to choose their own kind of note-taking? Be honest, I wouldn't be
we talked about that a lot, actually, when we came back after the committee and had all of the committee work on the table. And we really narrowed it down. I think we chose 3 note-taking strategies. And the reason why was because we We understand the menu board, which is kind of where we started with, or hodgepodge, or whatever, however you want to name it. But we did want to give students a little bit of differentiation of this works for me and this doesn't. So Cornell Notes is one. There's some that are a little more complex. There are some that are a little more informational. You know, and our hope that we've talked a lot about with the committee is that as we continue the note-taking modules, we really can root down in how does this note-taking strategy go with this academic class. So in math, you know, this type of note-taking may work, and Cornell Notes may work really well in history or science, but in your ELA class, this is the kind of note-taking strategies that you would utilize. So I think as we get into some more complex learning, that is where we'll take the next couple of years of note-taking. But this year, we really tried to keep it simple, but not solo.
And so, like all good curriculum, which is what you're building, it will build on each other and so forth, and get more complex,
Yes.
and get more rooted, and get more pushed out to other classes and
Correct.
classrooms.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Yes. We will continue to build on it, nothing in a silo.
Nothing is in a silo.
Yeah.
And so, to that point, as we roll this out next year and the year after, I'm going to go back to Ms. Sell's original question. What are we looking for that impact to be for our now sixth graders? What are we looking for that to look like for them as eighth graders? Are we looking at late work? Are we looking, what are we going to use kind of as the reflection of, are we doing this well?
I can say one thing that I'm looking for. You know, I do campus surveys, student surveys every year, and one of the things that always is concerning for me, and it's always, you know, it's always something that's in my campus improvement plan is those student results. The things that they struggle with are these very things, and in turn, you know, one of the things that they struggle with that is an issue for them is stress and anxiety. So I'm looking for those things to come down in those results. I'll be very blunt. That's what I'm looking for.
I love a good measurement. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the presentation. I think we've come a long ways. I remember two things that Mr. Kaj taught me. Once was in June of 2014, had to do with devices, which I'll save for another day. But the other was regarding Avid, and I've mentioned this before, and how he integrates. It's not Avid Campus, but it's Avid integrated, like special ed. And I gather that that's what you're doing, right? You're integrating it across the teachers. Kelly, you talk about with the programs with your teachers, Christy teaching a class and getting excited about the curriculum, and then I'm sure, inspiring your teachers to that. One thing I would say is this is an example where SEL, competencies and curriculum, are not a dog whistle for another acronym. I'm making that intentionally, and my email is millert@list.net for anybody that wants to question that. This is a very important example where social emotional strategies, learning strategies, competencies and curriculum come together for the benefit of the students. If I would have had this, maybe I wouldn't have started to fail my freshman year of college. My parents didn't know how to study, and the strategy was, for every 30 minutes you read, you got to watch Gilligan's Island or Bewitched. That's not a good strategy to learn to study for college. And so I appreciate where we're headed with this and the progress that we made, and also looking forward to us rolling this out. I do agree with Ms. Prosnick on, a consistent strategy and note-taking. Don't choose whatever you want. I'm not a Cornell note fan. When my wife started doing Avid, I started looking into Cornell, and I thought, doing this in the business world just is not, it's too hard. And so it might help in college, but where it goes after that, or in other vocations, it might be more difficult. But I appreciate the progress in this, excited to see it roll out, and appreciate kind of the integration of the kind of holistic learning opportunities for kids and helping them prepare for whatever they do from a CCMR perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank y'all very much. Y'all done great work.
All right.
right, so Dr. Fitzhugh is going to have the next two presentations, of course. We'll start with House Bill 3, Campus Goals.
Okay, I think I hit the right button. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to revisit House Bill 3. Just as a historical piece, we started this in 2020, 2021. Last year, at the end of the year, was our completion of our first year with the goals. We gave an update on the reading and math goal, but we did not come around and present our results on the CCMR goal. So that's the first thing we're going to do tonight is come back and revisit those, and then we're going to talk about updates to the goals moving forward. So CCMR goal, this was the template that we used. This was the goal we were on year 2021 last year. The all-student goal was 81%, and then across the row you can kind of see how each student group was written. When we pulled the data, so a note on this, the 2021 data is actually based on the class of 2020 because that is how the data is processed in terms of trying to get a graduating class all of their data in one place. So 2020 is the year that was used. District-wide, we met 5 of our targets. We did not meet all of them. 4 of our 5 high school campuses met their all-student target as well. I think that's something we should be proud of, being that the class of 2020 was really impacted by the shutdown, initially with the pandemic. All of the testing opportunities and those different pieces were not available to them as they finished out their year. So I feel like we actually did a pretty good job with that one. We also, for the first time this past school year, began offering TSI, ACT, and SAT at all of our campuses during the school day. That was not in place for that class of 2020. So all of that being said, we've put a lot of structures in place that support us moving forward on this goal. Just another note that we have to keep in mind is that several higher education facilities are changing their entrance requirements, and so we might need to come back and relook at if colleges are no longer looking at TSI and ACT and SAT, do we need to adjust what we are saying are measures of college readiness as well? So that's just a note on this slide. Okay, moving forward now that we've updated CCMR. So our goals for the 2021-2022 school year. So we already had that 5-year goal template filled out, but we went back and revisited several pieces, if you kind of remember us talking back in June. One of the things that we really talked about a lot was math, and 3rd grade math, and our use of iStation math, and what was the appropriate target. So the previous target was Tier 1, but we felt that based on looking at some different structures, that might be set a little high. So we went back and looked at that target score of 494 and how our students performed on other measures. Was 494 a good predictor of student readiness? And what we found was that 90% of our students who had a 494 actually performed acceptably on other measures as well. So we have amended our district and all of our campus math goals to be students achieve a 494 versus a tier 1 score. We're going to continue to monitor that, and we will adjust each year as we have this past year. We did not make any changes to our goal values for the 5 years, like each of the numbers, and you have the charts look the same. We also have provided y'all with campus-specific goals, and the campuses amended based on their data that they had from the 2020-21 school year. So this is the district goal. It's the same as it was last year. I've just highlighted 2022 because that's what we are moving to. If you notice, 2021, we met all of our targets for reading, so now we've just moved up to the 2022. For math, again, we've amended the goal at the top to say 494, and again, we've just moved down to the 2022 row in that chart. And then CCMR, again, we did not make any adjustments. We felt like we had put so many opportunities in place for the class of 2021 that we were on target to make our goals in 2022, so we have left that as well. Moving forward, we will come in November and talk about beginning of year House Bill 3 with the math and reading. In January, we're going to talk about readiness dashboards. In March, we will talk about the middle of year progress, and then June, we will come back with end of year. And with that, are there any questions?
Ms. Lasan.
I don't think I have any questions at this time, but thank you for all your work here, and I will digest all of this and get back to you if I have something. Thank you.
Lots of tables.
Ms. Hassett.
I think my questions are more both combined between this and STAR, and so I'll probably just ask them during the next one to, instead of duplicating. Thank you for all your work.
Thanks. You answered most of mine in the email today, but I did have a question. How often are the assessments done to keep assessing the data? Is that monthly, quarterly? How often is that done?
So on our assessment calendar, we ask them to be done beginning, middle, and end, but we do have campuses that utilize them more frequently. When students log into iStation, it gives them an initial assessment, so if students log in that month, they do take it. But so it just depends on the campus and the teacher at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Bonner.
No questions, thank you, sir.
Ms. Prosnick.
I'm going to follow up a little bit on Ms. Cox. So if I'm a student and I log in 10 times, do I count 10 times? Or do I only count when?
So you're only given the initial assessment the first time you log in
Right.
that month. And no, you don't count 10 times. Your score only comes in once for that month. So if I'm giving you January data, and then we also, just to make sure I don't double count students, do some data cleaning to make sure we don't have duplicates in there.
And we are doing mid-year for all students this year.
Yes, that is the plan.
That makes me very, very happy. 494, I know you settled on that number. Will, after you do the beginning of year assessment, is that when you will adjust, or is 494 where you're going to land for this year?
494, I feel, is a real good place to land for this year. We will continue to watch it. When we deployed iStation Reading, we really watched it closely. We weren't initially at Tier 1 with iStation Reading as well. We had a scale score that we targeted, and after about 3 or 4 years, and iStation had renormed and done some things, that Tier 1 became aligned with what it was, so we'll continue to keep our eye on.
Yes, back to the 494, and what are the other successful, with SCORE, we're successful on other measures. Can you talk about those other measures?
So we had local CBA data, we had STAR data, and so we just kind of looked at both of those to kind of see where were students successful at what point on all measures, and where did they kind of come together.
Okay, that's what I presumed, but I wanted to make sure of that verification. And then once I'm assuming that the 494 was a lowering of the Tier 1.
It was.
Can
It
you
actually.
talk about,
Okay.
yeah, can you talk about that difference and how big of a difference that is? I think that we have probably some questions on why we're lowering our standard. And so if you could just talk a little bit about that, I would appreciate it.
So in terms of scale points, it kind of gets skewed when you talk about it. It was probably about a 20-point difference, but really what it boiled down to was if I looked at what score was needed to be Tier 1 beginning of year 4th grade, 494 was just higher than beginning of year 4th grade Tier 1. So we really struggled with why were we asking our 3rd graders end of year to perform at what was a middle of year 4th grade Tier 1 score. So when we started looking at that and realizing it was kind of an overshot, that's when we started trying to figure out what was a more realistic value for end of year 3rd grade, and that's where 494 came from.
One
you.
One thing I would just add to that that's so helpful about having Dr. Fitzhugh, because having been in curriculum well before there was ever a Dr. Fitzhugh doing what she does, the advantage we have is we're able to really have somebody take a statistical deep dive on these instruments that we're using. And so we don't have to just accept what the company says should be the cutoff. We're able to actually look at, does that make sense from a statistical perspective? And we really appreciate her help on that.
And we appreciate you too, and I kind of knew the answer. I just wanted to make sure that our listening audience and those that are interested understood that we actually, as we always do in LASD, go above, not so. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzhugh. I got a feeling you're still going to be up here for the next item. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The fun keeps going.
Let's go. Ms. Hess, it's your first line of questioning, so just remember that.
So 2021 STAR, such an exciting topic. So 2021 STAR is quite a complex topic to discuss, just because there are so many different factors that go into that data and how we need to look at it. The initial pieces that came out, we tried to really sum up data. I feel like lots of places were summing it up and putting numbers out there, and there's just a lot of things to keep in mind. So with that in mind, we kind of looked at the data 3 different ways in terms of what all was going on. The first was we looked at overall performance. The second piece that we started looking at was the performance based on time spent in virtual learning. I think the biggest categorical issue that we have right now is that we are trying to say a student was virtual or not in the 2020-21 school year, and the truth is, it's to what extent you were virtual in the 2021 school year. So when we're reporting data as virtual or not, we're kind of missing that degree of virtual. So we really spent some time looking at that. And then we also looked at TEA is about to move us on to online testing. And so how did our students perform paper versus online? Because that was a huge factor that kind of came in last year. So the first bit here, this is our STAR reading data. You have the LISD data, the state numbers, and then next to it is how the scores changed. Our scores did drop, but when you look, you can see they did not quite drop as much as the state scores did. So whenever we start talking about there were huge losses, we did have a little bit. It just was not at the extent that is being reported across the board. So third graders, we had 75% of our students who tested. That's another piece that I didn't put there in the beginning. Not all of our students tested this year. So 75% of our students who tested met the approaching standard. 72% of fourth, 80% of fifth, 70% of sixth, 78% of seventh, and then 78% of eighth. Now, STAR math, that's where we saw a little bit of a larger change between the school years. When you looked at 2019 compared to 2021, I think it's also important to note that we're missing a year in the middle, so this is a big gap between. But we had 70% of our third graders approaching in math. The state had 61. We had 66% of fourth, 80% at fifth, 76% at sixth. Seventh grade is 53%, but I have to remind you guys that we do not have our advanced testers in our seventh grade group. They accelerate to eighth grade. So our percentage performing does not have some of our it doesn't have any accelerated students. Our accelerated students either take sixth, eighth, or algebra. So our value is still the same, just a little bit less than the state, and we're missing a large portion of our students there. And then eighth grade was at 72. So with that being said, there's been a lot of discussion about virtual learning and how virtual learning impacted student performance on STAR. So I got a little curious, and I made some bar graphs. This is I am a fun person to be around. So what I did was I had Kathy Bray pull the percent of time that a student had in-person attendance codes. And so that's what that x-axis is down there on the bottom. It's just the degree. It goes from none up to a full school year. Then the y-axis is just the count of students. Just gives you we have 100, 200 in this group. So the green bar represents students that were approaching. The red section is students that were not approaching. And then the blue were students who did not test. So one thing you can see with that blue group is we had students who opted to not test, regardless of being all virtual or not. So we're missing students across the board. The next piece that you see is that we have students approaching, regardless of how much time they spent in virtual learning. Like that green bar, those green bars across that whole x-axis show, we had students meeting the standard. And again, you have students who are not approaching across the span as well. So it just made me start questioning, is this really, are our results a result of virtual? That was a lot of results. Here's the same data for 6th grade reading. Here's 4th grade math. And then there's 6th grade math. That's what I've pulled out. And you kind of see the same trend across. I made a graph for every 3 through 8 reading and math. You see it across the board. I will say with the 7th and 8th grade, because we have so many students who change tests around, the blue bars get a little bit, because maybe they took algebra instead of the 8th grade test, so those I didn't include because that gets a little bit iffy. So that was way 2 that we looked at the data. And then our third way was we looked at the mode of testing. So one of the things we really encouraged campuses to do was to take this opportunity and practice online testing, because we knew that there was going to be a recess from accountability ratings, and we were moving more to online testing according to TEA. So we needed to test out our infrastructure. We needed to see what worked and didn't work, so it wasn't a test day where students and campuses needed students to have everything working 100% smoothly. If you look at this, you can see for reading, at 3rd grade, 73% of our online students were approaching, 78% of our paper students were approaching. You get down there to 8th grade, and you have 66% of online and 90% of paper. Now, I will tell you the one limitation of this was campuses opted in. It wasn't a random sample of you do paper, you do online. So while we have about half of our kids in both modes, we had some campuses that went all in online, and we have some that did not. And so that's one of those pieces we need to look into as well. But it was just very interesting that we were at 66% for online and 90% for paper. And then we had STAR Math. And again, our values for online, the elementary had a little bit of difference. It wasn't as big of a difference, but you start getting to those upper grades and you can really see a difference in online and paper testing. So, just a note, in 2022-23, all assessments are going to be online. That's something we're moving to. We, based on our current and the way everything worked out, we should be able to support online testing because we have invested in our infrastructure and devices to the extent that we have. That is one thing that did not work out the same for all other districts that tried to do more online testing, but we really, as long as the state system worked, because we did have a hiccup with the state system, if the state system was working, our systems worked. The other note is that the state at this point in time is not providing additional funds to cover this, and we would not be in the place we are without the use of our bond funds. There you go. So, in conclusion, STAR is really complex this year, and we should be really, really We should have a lot more conversations about the data versus jumping to conclusions 100% of the time when we look at it. The available data doesn't indicate that students who engaged in virtual learning performed significantly different than their peers who were in person. We are using local assessments and other data to meet student needs. We started working with students this summer to provide acceleration as needed. And we reached out to TEA about our concerns with online testing, but they have not gotten back to us yet. So, any questions?
Let me jump in on that, Dr. Fitzhugh, because she has worked diligently to try to explain that it's very inconclusive that what TEA is saying is that all these students in academic gaps is for sure the reason, and we have no doubt that that is part of the reason. But when they changed the testing system and forced online, I mean, at least for us with 50-50, there could be some correlation that the mode of the first time for these online testers is difficult for these kids that have always taken it on paper. And EA, I don't think, is willing to concur with that point. But surprise.
Ms. Hassett.
I have a couple questions. Mr. Miller, thank you for being a toot. Okay. One of my questions was, have you asked TEA? So never mind. If you find out what they say, will you let us know what they say? I have several questions. With our math scores being lower, and then some of the campuses have a more significant drop than others in third grade reading. So if the students are already behind in third grade reading, if our math scores were lower, I guess it's really a Dr. Rapp question. Are we just focused on these kids on some of the 45-45 and are all of the other support systems that we have? I'm just really concerned, as I know everybody else is. With the math scores, math is different than reading. We have to make sure that they're up in reading levels first before they understand the math curriculum thoroughly.
Yeah.
And
So
it's concerning with some of the scores in some of the campuses dropping 15%.
in their reading.
And they're reading, third grade reading.
Yeah. So, something that is interesting set of data, of course, is what our iStation's telling us that kids can do versus what STAR is telling us that kids can do, right? And so how do we use all of those data sources to try to prioritize and sort through? Is this a reading issue for students? Is it a math conceptual issue for students? Is it a test-taking modality issue for students? So, of course, we're going to have to try to get to the root of what caused a student not to do well. And that's what the campuses, of course, do all the time. The testing modality is an extra variable to that conversation. You absolutely always, with kids, look to solve reading issues first, because if you, as we all know, if you can help increase their reading, that's going to help them in math. But we are also making a concerted effort, and I know Karen Spalding's here tonight with us. We're doing time for math. This year we're modeling that professional development for our teachers after our time for literacy, because some of the things we're still continuing to need to work on is building the conceptual understanding of mathematics for students. And so as we continue to have that focus with teachers, we know that that's going to translate to their classroom practice as well, and that should also then translate to our math scores. The question is going to be, do we see iStation track with STAR, our own measurements, or do we see our iStation scores start to tell us something different than STAR? So that's a really long answer to say it's quite a puzzle to sort through. The different modality testing, especially with math, is really challenging. There's no doubt that you have to teach students how to take a test in that format,
How do you use your scratch paper? How do you use your manipulatives? How do you break down that question? So you'll find some students who score very well in reading are not scoring well in math. It's not because they can't read. They aren't using their resources and tools as much as they should be, and we've got to help them with that better. So all of the above is what you have to look into.
Okay. Great answer. It's going to take a lot of work. Okay, also with the potential decrease in retakes of STAR, will the data particularly also start declining as well, potentially?
It definitely has the potential to do that, because there's no doubt that the retakes are one of the reasons why 5th and 8th go up. So, it's going to be interesting to see how the state, they do with that. Of course, we'll have additional data at 5 and 8, and when things start to get high stakes for kids, especially in high school, of course, you start to see some of these puzzle pieces fall into place, and that's what we've said all along, even to our elected officials, is when you give us the amount of time that we need, we can work on giving tools the kids they need to be ready to graduate. But you're holding us accountable for immediate solving of a variety of situations at specific grade levels. So it's going to affect the scores for sure, not having multiple tests.
And we're still waiting for 45, 233 to come to fruition, but I'm a little worried about that.
I would just add one piece, just whenever we're comparing, to make sure that you're comparing first administration to first administration when you're looking at numbers. The numbers that are presented in the TAPR are 2 years worth. I mean, they're 2 admins, but the data that I presented here, I pulled first admin to first admin only.
Okay. That's good to know. Let's see. That was my question already asked, and you don't know. You guys have responded. Hold on a second. I have a question. For 3rd grade reading STAR, the paper is slightly higher than, I'm just wondering why some of the discrepancies on paper, because this is their first administration so it is, and these are the students who, of all of the students, are going to be more savvy with technology. Is it just because they're 3rd grade and they're not used to technology overall as much? But why are we still seeing some of the 7-8% in approaching with paper higher than online?
I think that goes to the piece of we really have to look at a lot of more factors before we say this is the cause of it.
Okay.
I really can't 100% say. I do know that we had some campuses, it could be the campus combo of who tested what.
Okay.
I can't remember in these numbers. Sorry, I've run them so many times. There's a higher group of ELL students that get accommodations online. A lot of your SPED students get accommodations. So I know for the district numbers, I pulled special ed students out of that online group, just out of total, because it's such a different variable that messes with it. So there's just a lot of different pieces that go into it.
Okay.
To basically sum up my answer.
Good answer. I think that's the only question, besides I wanted just to make sure everybody was aware that approaches is including all students, not just students with approaches. Approaches and above is what the data shows, right? So your data for...
So approaches includes, if a student met, they were also approaches. If a student was masters, they were also approaches.
So it includes everyone?
Yes.
Approaches and above?
Yes.
Not just approaches?
Not just
Just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you for all your work. I'm sure I'll have more questions later, but I really do appreciate y'all's work.
Feel free. I have lots of graphs.
I love them. I already make my own little one before I...
You are Miss Hassett's new BFF. So, anyway, I think, Dr. Rogers, the new buzzword is going to be assumptions. This to me is crazy. It's kind of all over the place. So you've kind of answered it, Dr. But how are we as a district to make assumptions for the needs of our students based on this convoluted test to what we need to provide to our students? I know we have iStation that, but what does that look like, for our district? Because, this was really crazy with some that were online. What do we, kind of asking a couple questions in at once, what do we allude to the online versus the, paper? Is it just a visual thing, or were there differences in questions online that there were on paper? What does this look like for us?
I need to verify, but I don't believe that the tests were different. But I need to double check that piece of the, I think there's multiple pieces to this. I think that we have really worked hard to create a district-wide set of data that we could use as a reliable source, because for years we have known that STAR can be moved in terms of targets in different ways that it has been used. So we have local assessments, we have grades, we have iStation. We had put in place the reading, I'm not going to get the right word out, Adrian.
Check-ins.
Literacy check-ins, thank you. I was like, reading recovery is not right. Literacy check-ins, we're moving more towards math conversations. I mean, we've put a lot of pieces in place so that we're not reliant upon one piece of data. So I think that helps us, and that's how we were able to start a summer program. We started summer programs using local data because we didn't have STAR at the time, and we couldn't wait for STAR. So I feel like that's a place that we're really ahead of the curve in some ways with this. The other thing that we're very aware of as we move to online testing is that our students have to learn how to take online math tests. Luckily, we'd already started with iStation Math. One of the things we realized was, are we making sure our kids have scratch paper? Are we making sure that they're taking their time with it? Do they know how to? Because you cannot use mental math to solve fourth grade STAR questions, math STAR, I mean, you just can't. So how are we building those skills early on so that when we do fully transition to online, our students are ready for it? So I think there's a lot of different approaches going on when it comes to that.
Thank you very much for your hard work and to all the district.
So, implementation gap, right? Yeah, so in the past, if the test changed from TAX to STAR, from TOS, et cetera, we were changing a paper form and increasing the rigor, or maybe changing the structure of the test, right? Totally changing approach here. So
Yes.
a different kettle of fish, right?
Yes.
So what's going on across the state and other districts? Similar results?
I don't know that all districts use this opportunity to explore the online testing piece. So I think, again, we were kind of forward-thinking with that we were trying to see what gaps existed as we moved there. I think other places have the same concerns that we do. When they moved EOC to an online available test, it wasn't required, it was just available. Surrounding districts chose not to give it online because they noticed their students of poverty did not do as well on the online version as their students did on paper. So this conversation is not new. It just became full scale 3-through that we were able to bring it to light. That being said, I don't know how those conversations are being approached with TEA.
So a follow-up, it sounds like we've got one more year to practice
Yes, sir.
before it becomes implemented. How are we working with principals, or how are we anticipating working with principals to practice how you play this next year?
We're kind of in a tough spot. So we do have online assessments that we use, iStation. We can move some of our local assessments to online via Edge4, EdgeNet. Like there's some different ways we can embed and get our students to test online. The problem is there is not another program that mimics the accommodations and the tools that TEA has in their STAR format. So we're trying to do our best to get students acclimated, but we just don't have a program that mimics it exactly. And so I think that's a real caveat. It's something that learning and teaching is really trying to work and try to figure out how we can have our students best prepared. But I think the other thing we're really aware of is the more time we spend trying to have kids prepared for a test, the less time we're teaching content. So how do we balance the two?
And I would say, to that point, and of course, all of us that have seen multiple iterations of tests come through, Anytime you're switching from just the paper mode stays paper, it's the actual content of the questions that changes. That's one type of change to deal with. A modality change, I think, is being swept a little bit more under the rug. That is a major change on kids. That's bigger than just a content, because you have to learn all new tools. You have to think about how you assess, and all of a sudden the next thing you find, we're talking about all those tools that fit now for this type of assessment, because you're not going to need or see the same tools in maybe the iStation math assessment. Will things catch up to mimic STAR? Probably, right? That's the cycle of life when they make these kind of changes, but it's one of those things that's a little bit concerning for sure, that the high stakes associated in this same, while the modality's changing, is something that should be discussed.
Yeah, and Dr. Bronner, the other thing I'd add is, and Dr. Fitz, you alluded to it, how fortunate we are in LISD, because I have no idea how a lot of districts are going to even get there by 2023. I mean, that's going to be a big question the state's going to have to address, I think.
Yeah, we've kind of not asked any questions about our preparedness, because we are prepared. So, yeah, you're exactly right. Thank you very much.
Well, I am more firm in my conviction of why I do not like this test. I am more firm in my conviction that as a board, we do not give value to this test when it comes to our goals and to evaluations. I don't care if you give it online or if you give it in paper, it's still a poorly written, poorly executed test, in my opinion. I will ask you a question about sixth grade reading STAR, math STAR. Is it also fair to say that some of those accelerated students are not testing in sixth grade because they're not testing sixth grade, they're testing seventh and eighth, or not? Am I reading
No,
it
actually,
wrong?
our sixth grade accelerated students still take sixth grade, because the entire seventh grade curriculum hasn't been covered during the span of sixth grade. But by the time they get to seventh grade pre-AP, or it's not pre-AP anymore, honors, seventh grade honors, the entire seventh grade and eighth grade has been covered, so they take the eighth grade test.
Okay. That's where I was losing that data in there. Thank you. That's why you have your job and I do not. And then my other question, and it is a bit on like how we teach, and you've kind of alluded to it, but it is a question. Does our local data say the same thing?
So our local data, in terms of standardized testing, looking tests, I mean, depending on the campus, some of the scores come in, you can tell that students are struggling to acquire some of those more difficult skill sets. It's not quite to the extent that this is, but you still see that there are some areas for growth.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your work, and I like how you like a pretty graph.
Okay, my first comment is kind of a statement, but just wanted you to address it just because it's stated on here, and I want people to think that we do not only, and it's the statement, LISD offered summer learning to students in order to begin closing learning gaps. We are always working to close learning gaps. So I wanted to make sure that that was specified, that that was not just a summer project of ours, that it's a continual project. So
It is, yes, a very continual process and piece that we work on every year, every summer. We just know that this year there was heightened awareness, and so that's why I put that piece in there.
Perfect. Just want to make that statement. Do you know who did the online STAR for TEA?
Say that one more time.
Do you know who prepared the online STAR for TEA?
Well, the platform last year was provided through ETS. TEA actually owns the assessments, the content of them, but the platform was ETS. We're transitioning to a new platform, which also kind of makes this a little bit muddier. So I believe it's Cambium. Is that right? Cambium is who they're moving to, and so we don't have all those pieces yet in terms of what their online system looks like.
And do we know how the grading was accomplished? Especially for reading?
I'm sure it was computer scored, the way a Scantron would be scored based on pencil marks going through a scanner.
They were all ABCD, or there was no?
The writing had some there was a written assessment, and I believe they had readers read. I'd have to double check it, but I think that they still had people read the typed in responses.
Reading of that. How
Say that
many
again.
years? have
ETS
we-
wasn't AI. I don't know if Cambion's going to be.
ETS was not AI.
No.
How many years have we had in LISD where we have not had hiccups with STAR?
None in my recent memory.
Just wanted that out there. And then, as I thought about, and I wanted to commend Mr. Colback and his team for our technology, and Dr. Bonner was right. When we look across the state, our ability to do the online that they're going to require kind of takes me back to that cheer in that we've got technology. Yes, we do. We've got technology. How about you? And I think that TEA might need to do a little refresh. So that's the end of my comments.
No funding. No funding, though.
I don't know how to follow that one, but,
Ms. Lasan.
It's getting late.
oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lasan.
Yeah, I think maybe we're getting a little slap happy up here.
It was
So-
the graphs.
Yeah, it was the graphs that did it. So, I just wanted to say I really appreciate all of this. Gosh, this is great information about a poor subject. You've done a good job with that. I guess really the only question I had was I'm just trying to picture taking them, and you guys have both kind of alluded to it, but so when you're taking a STAR math test, because you get down to the 7th and 8th grade, that's a huge gap as far as the results. So I'm picturing a kid sitting there with their, so they get scratch paper, they get to work out the problems and whatever. What kinds of things are allowed to do a 8th grade math STAR test?
8th grade math,
For
you're
a
allowed
normal student without accommodations.
You're allowed paper, pencil. I believe at 8th grade, you're allowed to use a calculator. I don't have that mixed up with 9th grade. And so those are the pre-standard. There's a formula chart. I think the biggest thing that happens, and I will speak as a former math teacher, when the problem is right on the page and they just have to make notes next to it, you struggle to get students to show their work. So when you're asking students to read this, then translate it all here, that's just a lot of steps. And it's a 3-step problem by the time you get to the higher grade levels because we've made it more complex because we got to make sure that we can combine skills to make sure that you can do the math. It just is a lot for an 8th grade student to try
Especially
to
when
process.
they change the type of tests in 23.
Right.
So it's more simple than them having a problem, working it out, and picking A, B, C, D, and putting and selecting it. Yeah,
Yes.
I understand it. I'm just trying to visualize.
And you're
what they're
asking
going
them to do
through.
that 50 times.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And there's an option to just click A and move on.
Right.
And so I think that when you've done 5 questions and you're done, it's much easier to click. At least when you had to bubble, it took some time to bubble.
Yeah.
But the clicking is just, I can be done with it. So,
Because the problem is on the computer screen, and then they're having to, okay.
yes.
Gotcha.
Now, they might be able to underline and highlight the text of the problem, but you're still going to have to translate that.
To your paper. Okay. Okay, I was just trying to visualize okay. Well, thank you for the information.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzhugh. I feel like this is a game of Jenga, and we talk about this every year. Things change. I just am so thankful that in the business world, you don't have to worry about finding out whether you've been successful at the end of the year because somebody made a determination of what that measure was. So I have two questions. Dr. Bonner asked one of mine, which was how other districts fared. When parents or students opt out in that one section, does that affect the campus grade level score?
So this year it did not. There was kind of because we didn't have accountability, there's not a rating. In general, what happens is that the student is counted absent. Anything above 5% of a student population being absent counts as an automatic failure. So if 6% of your kids are absent, that 1% are going to be added into the value as failures.
And then I think the last question, and maybe this is, we talked to Sean about this as we build our legislative agenda. The 60 by 30, that's the right number, right? It seems like that has to be adjusted because our evaluation is going to be adjusted, and it's predominantly based on an evaluation instrument that is very dynamic at this point in its evaluation and in its distribution, or what do you call it, in giving the exam. Implementation. So, it would be interesting when you get into your wonky mode, or maybe that's normal, how that would be affected, how that would affect something like that. If we see a multi-year adjustment, which I assume that going online would be, then we'd have to recalibrate some of those things. It's a setback so.
Yes.
Any other questions? Ms. Hassett?
I think it would be helpful to the board. Can you walk through with the board when we get to see the test questions in the new format with the new types of questions, so that we as a board can see the types of questions that are online and how it's different than we tested that thousands of years ago?
We definitely can.
Because I think that'd be very helpful to really understand the situation that you're talking about visually, because it is drastically different. I think it would be helpful.
I think we could definitely show you the different types of questions. I don't know if I'll be able to show them to you in an online format, the way that the state will test them. Like, we don't have that available yet,
Okay.
but I can definitely show you question types, but we're going to have to hold until the new platform is launched and something is provided to allow students to practice.
And would you have any idea when that is going to be, if we're supposed to have 2022? I mean, they have to have field test questions and things like that. Aren't they going to start doing field test questions on that with a group?
We're field testing them, we're just not field testing them. I don't know that we have them field tested online. And I'm sure
I thought they were demanding some districts do it online.
I'm sure they are. They just haven't launched the platform, but we do have field testing this year. I don't know if we've been mandated to do them online. I know we're mandated in language. I'll double check to see if the mode is
I think
mandated.
language would be helpful to see. I think math is, or science, those are new questions with the new format, are drastically different than anything we've ever seen before. And so any way that you can show and highlight to the board the changes that are coming would be greatly appreciated. Okay, thank you.
Kind of piggybacking on the new format, the new questions, I'm just kind of curious. I've never asked this question. Do we give feedback to TEA on the STAR test and their content of their questions? Well, I didn't ask if they
TEA gets
accepted. I asked
teacher
if we
input.
gave feedback.
We provide TEA with a lot of feedback. I don't know that they always act on the feedback. They don't always request the feedback, but we do provide it.
Trust me, they do know who Dr. Fitzhugh is.
Okay, these were 4 really important topics. They're deep topics. Thank you to staff for being prepared, and thank you for the board for equally being prepared and asking some questions that Dr. Fitzhugh and others were able to answer for us, have time to prepare for those. So thank you very much. If there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 8:09 p.m.